The scalpel slipped from Kellen's trembling fingers as the patient's heart monitor flatlined. The piercing alarm cutting through the chaos of the emergency room like a death knell. He had been operating for 18 hours straight, his body running on nothing but adrenaline and the desperate need to save lives as the city burned outside. The plague had arrived 3 weeks ago, turning the streets into a graveyard and the hospital into humanity's last stand. "We're losing him," Kalen shouted, his voice cracking with exhaustion as he reached for the defibrillator. The young man on the table couldn't be more than 25, his body ravaged by the same mysterious illness that had claimed thousands. Just as Kalen prepared to shock the patient back to life, the power grid failed, plunging the entire hospital into darkness. In that moment of absolute despair, a warm hand covered his, steady and sure. "Let me help you," came a voice like liquid honey, somehow soothing despite the chaos. Emergency lighting flickered on, revealing the most extraordinary woman Kalen had ever seen. Zephora moved with fluid grace, her silver hair catching the dim light as she began manual compressions on the patient's chest. Her eyes, a startling shade of violet, met his with an intensity that made his heart skip. "Who are you?" Kalen whispered, mesmerized by the way her hands seemed to glow with an otherworldly warmth as she worked. She wasn't wearing scrubs or any hospital identification, yet she moved with the confidence of someone who had danced with death countless times. "Someone who refuses to let death win tonight," Zephora replied, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place. As she continued compressions, something impossible happened. The patient's color began to return. His breathing steadied, and the heart monitor resumed its steady rhythm. The man's eyes fluttered open, confusion and gratitude mingling in his gaze. Kalen stared in disbelief. In 15 years of practicing medicine, he had never witnessed anything like this. The patient should have been dead, yet here he was, sitting up and asking for water. "How did you, Dr. Kalen?" Zephora interrupted, somehow knowing his name despite never having met him. "We need to talk. What you've witnessed tonight is only the beginning." She gestured toward the window where the city sprawled in darkness, punctuated by distant fires. "This plague isn't natural, and traditional medicine won't stop it. But together, we might have a chance." As if summoned by her words, screams erupted from the waiting room. More patients were arriving, their conditions worse than anything Kalen had seen. The plague was evolving, becoming more virulent, more deadly. He watched Zephora move toward the sound of suffering, her presence somehow bringing calm to the chaos. "Wait!" Kalen called out, catching her arm. The moment their skin touched, electricity coursed between them, and for an instant he saw flashes of her memory's ancient temples, healing rituals, a life that stretched back centuries. "What are you?" Zephora smiled, and despite the death surrounding them, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "I'm someone who has been waiting a very long time to meet you, Dr. Kalen Thorne. And if we're going to save this city, you'll need to trust me completely." The hospital shook as another explosion rocked the city, and Kalen realized that his quiet life of saving one patient at a time was about to change forever. 3 hours later, Kalen watched in stunned silence as Zephora laid her hands on the 7th patient of the night, each one miraculously recovering from the plague's advanced stages. The other medical staff had begun whispering about miracles, but Kalen knew he was witnessing something far more extraordinary and dangerous. "The ancient texts call it the Crimson Breath," Zephora explained as they retreated to his office, her violet eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. The power remained out, but somehow her presence made the darkness feel less oppressive. "It's not a natural plague, it's a weapon, designed to thin the population before an invasion." Kalen poured himself a cup of cold coffee, his hands still, shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. "Invasion by whom? And how do you know all this?" He studied her face, noting the way shadows seemed to dance around her features, as if she existed partially in another realm. "I've been hunting the ones responsible for 3 centuries, she said simply, as if discussing the weather. They call themselves the Umbral Collective, beings from a dimension where life force is currency. They seed worlds with the crimson breath, then harvest the dying energy to fuel their own existence. 3 centuries, Kalen repeated, his scientific mind rejecting the impossibility, even as his heart recognized the truth in her words. That's impossible. Can't be more than 30. Zephyra moved closer, and he caught the scent of jasmine and something else. Something ancient and mysterious. I stopped aging the night I bonded with the luminous core, she said, pulling a pendant from beneath her shirt. The crystal pulsed with inner light, warm and alive. It chose me to be its guardian, to stand against the darkness wherever it spreads. Before Kaelin could respond, the office door burst open. Dr. Miranda Voss, the hospital's chief administrator, stood in the doorway with 2 security guards. Her face was pale with fear and suspicion. Dr. Thorne, I need to speak with you immediately. There are reports of unusual healing methods being used in the ER. What? Kaelin stepped protectively in front of Zephyra, surprised by his own instinctive reaction. Dr. Voss, we're in the middle of a crisis. Whatever concerns you have, concerns. Miranda's voice rose to a near shriek. 7 patients who should be dead are now walking around perfectly healthy. The CDC is sending investigators, and there are rumors of ... of witchcraft. Her eyes fixed on Zephyra with naked hostility. Who? Is this woman? And what has she done to our patients? Zephyra placed a gentle hand on Kellen's shoulder, her touch sending warmth through his entire body. Dr. Voss, isn't it? She said, her voice carrying an otherworldly authority. Your concern for your patients is admirable. But right now, we have bigger problems than explaining medical miracles. As if summoned by her words, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the hospital corridors. The lights flickered, and through the window, Kaelin saw shapes moving in the darkness, tall, gaunt figures with eyes like burning coals. The Umbral Collective had arrived. They found me, Zephyra whispered, her pendant flaring with brilliant light. Kaelin, I need you to evacuate the hospital. Get everyone to the underground parking garage. The concrete and steel will provide some protection. I'm not leaving you, he said fiercely, surprising himself with the intensity of his conviction. They had known each other for less than 6 hours, yet the thought of losing her felt like losing part of his soul. Zephyra turned to face him, her violet eyes now glowing with the same inner light as her pendant. Then stay close to me, my brave doctor, because tonight we're going to discover just how bright love can shine in the darkest of places. The hospital shook as something massive struck the building. And Kaelin knew their real battle was just beginning. The Umbral Collective poured through the hospital, shattered. Windows like liquid shadow, their forms shifting between human and nightmare as they moved. Kaelin pressed himself against Zephyra's back, feeling the heat radiating from her pendant as she raised her hands. Brilliant light streaming from her fingertips. Stay behind me, she commanded, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to vibrate through his bones. The first shadow creature lunged toward them, its claws extended. But Zephyra's light struck it like a physical blow, sending it screaming back into the darkness. They feed on fear and despair, but they cannot touch pure love. Shh. Pure love. Kellen's mind raced even as he watched her battle the creatures with graceful, deadly precision. How could he feel love for someone he had just met? Yet as he watched her fight to protect not just him, but everyone in the hospital, he realized that what he felt transcended rational thought. It was as if his soul had recognized hers across time and space. Dr. Thorne? Miranda's voice cut through the chaos as she and the security guards stumbled into the corridor, dragging several patients behind them. The things are everywhere. They're killing everyone they touch. Zephyra spun, her light expanding to encompass the entire group. Where her radiance touched them, Kaelin saw their fear transform into something else. Hope, determination, and an inexplicable sense of peace. The evacuation tunnels, she said urgently. There's a passage that leads to the old subway system. It's warded against their kind. How do you know about passages I don't even know exist? Kaelin asked as they began moving through the hospital, Zephyra's light carving a path through the writhing shadows. I helped design them, she replied, her attention focused on maintaining the protective barrier. 70 years ago, when the last incursion happened in London, we lost that battle, but we learned valuable lessons about how to prepare for the next one. They reached the basement, where Zephyra pressed her hand against what appeared to be a solid concrete wall. Ancient symbols flared to life under her touch, and the wall dissolved like morning mist, revealing a tunnel that stretched into darkness. "Quickly," she urged, guiding the survivors into the passage. "The wards will hold them for a while, but not forever." As the last of the group disappeared into the tunnel, Kaelin caught Zephyr's arm. "You're not coming with us, are you?" Her smile was heartbreakingly beautiful and infinitely sad. "The Umbral Collective has followed me across continents through decades of hiding. If I run again, they'll just find another populated area to terrorize. It descends tonight, one way or another." "Then I'm staying too," Kaelin said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. "You said love shines brightest in the darkness. Let me prove that to you." Zephyr's violet eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been wonder. "Kaelin, you don't understand. They'll try to corrupt you to turn your love into a weapon against me." "The risk is worth it," he interrupted, pulling her close. 3 centuries you've fought alone. You don't have to anymore." Before she could protest, he kissed her, and the world exploded into light. Their combined energy was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Not just the warm glow of her pendant, but something deeper, more primal. The very air around them shimmered with power, and from the tunnels above, they heard the Umbral Collective's howls of rage and pain. "Impossible." Zephora breathed against his lips. "The luminous core is responding to you. It's never done that with anyone before." "Maybe he was waiting for the right person," Kaelin said, feeling something fundamental shift within him. Could sense the creatures above, their hunger and hatred, but also their weakness. Maybe it was waiting for someone who could love you enough to share the burden. The pendant around Zephyr's neck pulsed brighter, and suddenly Kaelin felt its power flowing through him as well. He was no longer just a doctor trying to save individual lives. He was a warrior of light, standing beside the woman he loved. Against the forces of darkness? "Together then," Zephora said, her hand finding his. "Let's show them what love can do." The power flowing between them was intoxicating, like lightning made of pure emotion. Kaelin felt his perception expand beyond anything he had ever imagined. He could sense every living thing in the hospital, every shadow creature feeding on terror, and most incredibly, the vast network of light that connected all life across the world. "This is how I've always seen the world," Zephora said, her mental voice now intertwining with his thoughts. "The luminous core doesn't just heal, it reveals the truth beneath all illusions. You're adapting to it faster than anyone ever has." They moved through the hospital like twin stars, their combined radiance forcing the Umbral Collective to retreat to the upper floors. But Kaelin could sense something else, a presence far more ancient and malevolent than the shadow creatures. The true enemy was still hidden, waiting, their leader Zephora confirmed, following his thoughts. "Malachor the Void touched. He's been hunting me since the fall of Atlantis when I first bonded with the core. He won't face us directly until he's certain he can win." As they reached the main lobby, Kaelin saw the devastation the creatures had wrought. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, and worst of all, the drained husks of those who hadn't made it to the tunnels.
Ow.
Their life force had been completely consumed, leaving behind nothing but empty shells. "He's using them to grow stronger," Zephora said, her voice tight with grief and rage. "Every death feeds him, makes him more powerful. We have to stop him before the temperature in the lobby plummeted, and frost began forming on the windows." A voice like grinding stone echoed through the space, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Lara, my eternal quarry," the voice purred. "Still playing with mortals, I see. This one seems particularly attached to you. Shall I show him what happens to those who love the Lightbearer?" The shadows coalesced into a figure that defied description, tall and gaunt, with features that seemed to shift between human and something far more terrible. Malachor's eyes were holes in reality, and looking into them, Kaelin felt his sanity begin to fray. "Don't look directly at him," Zephora warned, positioning herself between Kaelin and the creature. "He feeds on despair and madness. Focus on me, on us, on what we feel together." But Malachor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, but he will look, won't he? When I begin to flay the skin from your bones, when I drain the light from your precious core piece by piece, He'll watch every moment. That's what love does. It makes you vulnerable, makes you weak. You're wrong, Kalen said, stepping out from behind Zephyra. The creature's presence was overwhelming, but he found strength in the warmth of her hand in his. Love doesn't make us weak. It makes us willing to sacrifice everything for something greater than ourselves. Malaker's laugh died as he sensed the power building between them. Impossible. The core chose only one guardian. Cannot bond with someone who loves that guardian completely. Zephora interrupted, her violet eyes blazing with triumph. You never understood, did you? The luminous core isn't just a weapon against the darkness. It's a catalyst for the most powerful force in the universe, the love between souls that recognize each other across time and space. The pendant around her neck suddenly split, half of its light flowing into Kellen's chest, settling over his heart like a warm embrace. He gasped as memories that weren't his own flooded through him, glimpses of ancient battles, of Zephyra fighting alone through countless centuries, of her growing weariness and despair. And underneath it all, a deep, abiding loneliness that resonated with something in his own soul. He had spent his entire life healing others while remaining isolated, afraid to form connections that might distract him from his calling. But now he understood they had been searching for each other all along, two halves of a whole that had been separated by fate and circumstance. Now you see, Zephora said softly, her mental voice caressing his thoughts. We were never meant to fight this battle alone, Malaker snarled, his form beginning to expand and darken. Touching. But even bonded, you cannot stand against the full might of the Umbral Collective. We are legion, and you are merely two. To who love each other, Kalen said, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones. That's something you'll never understand. Something you can never corrupt or destroy. The creature's roar of rage shook the building. Kalen knew their final battle was about to begin. Malaker's true form unfurled like a nightmare flower, its body expanding until he filled half the lobby, tentacles of living shadow writhing around him. Where they touched the walls, the concrete cracked and withered as if the very building was dying. His voice became a chorus of the damned, speaking in languages that predated human civilization. You think your pitiful love story will save you? He howled, lashing out with tendrils that moved faster than thought. I have consumed the life force of entire civilizations. I have watched lovers die in each other's arms, their final moments feeding my eternal hunger. Zephora and Kalen moved as one, their combined light creating a barrier that sent the shadow tentacles recoiling. But Kalen could feel the strain. Malaker was drawing power from every death in the city, growing stronger with each passing moment. He's too powerful, Zephora said through their mental link, her voice edged with desperation. 3 centuries of preparation, and he's still beyond our reach. Then we go deeper, Kalen replied, surprising himself with his certainty. You said the core responds to love? Oh, what if we stop holding back? What if we let it see everything we feel? Before Zephora could respond, Malaker struck again, this time targeting not their bodies, but their minds. Kalen screamed as visions flooded through him. Zephyra's memories of loss and failure, of loved ones who had died because she couldn't save them, of the crushing weight of centuries spent fighting a war that seemed unwinnable. See how she suffers, Malaker gloated, his mental voice like acid. Now, see how everyone she has ever cared for has died? You will join them, mortal, and she will carry the guilt of your death for the rest of her eternal existence. But instead of breaking under the assault, Kalen felt something unexpected. Not despair, but profound love and admiration. He saw not just Zephyra's failures, but her incredible courage, her refusal to surrender despite overwhelming odds. He saw the lonely girl who had first bonded with the core, accepting immortality and isolation to protect a world that would never know her sacrifice. You're wrong, he said aloud, his voice carrying across the lobby despite Malaker's howls. She's not broken by her losses, she's made stronger by them. Every life she couldn't save taught her how to save the next one. Every friend she lost showed her the preciousness of connection. Through their bond, he felt Zephyra's shock and wonder. No one had ever understood her burden so completely, had seen her pain, and chosen to love her more deeply because of it. And you, she said, her mental voice warm with newfound understanding. You've spent your whole life thinking you had to carry everything alone, but you never had to. You just had to find someone worth sharing it with, the luminous core responded. To their revelation, it's light becoming something beyond mere illumination. It was hope given form, love made manifest, the fundamental force that connected all living things across the universe. And it was growing stronger with every moment. They spent truly seeing each other. Malaker's confidence began to waver as he realized what was happening. No, he whispered, his form starting to contract. Love is weakness. Love is vulnerability. Love is the only thing that has ever truly mattered. Zephora finished, her violet eyes blazing with absolute certainty. And you've spent so long feeding on hatred and despair that you've forgotten the most basic truth of existence. She and Kalen stepped forward together, their combined radiance so intense that the shadows began to retreat, but they weren't attacking. They were healing, their light reaching out to touch not just Malaker, but every shadow creature in the hospital, every member of the Umbral Collective. "What are you doing?" Malaker screamed, his voice now tinged with something that might have been fear. "What we should have done from the beginning," Kalen said, understanding flooding through him. "We're not here to destroy you. We're here to remind you what you used to be." The light reached Malaker's core, and for an instant, his true form was revealed, not a creature of shadow and hunger, but a being of light who had lost his way so long ago that he had forgotten what it meant to hope, to love, to create rather than consume. "I remember," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I remember the light." As Malaker's shadow form began to dissolve, revealing the broken being of light beneath, Kalen felt a wave of profound sadness wash over him. This creature, this ancient enemy, had once been like Zephora, a guardian of life, a protector of the innocent. The corruption that had twisted him into something monstrous hadn't happened overnight. But across millennia of isolation and despair, "How long?" Zephora asked, her voice heavy with empathy as she approached the wavering figure. "How long have you been trapped in the darkness?" "Since the first dying," Malaker replied, his voice no longer the grinding stone of malevolence, but something fragile and broken. "I was there when the plague ships came to Lemuria. I tried to save them all, but I was alone. The weight of their suffering, their fear as they died, it changed me. I began to think that if I could just take their pain into myself, I could spare them. But pain corrupts, and soon I was taking more than suffering. I was taking everything." Kalen stepped forward, his medical training recognizing the symptoms of someone who had carried too much trauma for too long. "You were trying to heal the world by absorbing its wounds, but without someone to share the burden, it poisoned you instead." The Umbral Collective, Malaker continued, his form stabilizing as the truth poured out of him. "They were like me, healers, guardians, protectors who had lost their way. We found each other in the space between dimensions, and our combined despair created something new, something hungry." Through their bond, Kalen felt Zephora's anguish. "I could have helped you," she whispered, "if I had known, if I had reached out instead of fighting." "You couldn't have known," Malaker said, his features becoming more distinct as the shadows continued to recede. "The darkness makes you forget that light exists. It makes you believe that consumption is the only way to fill the emptiness inside." Around them, the other members of the Umbral Collective were also transforming, their shadow forms dissolving, to reveal beings of light who had been lost for countless ages. They looked around in confusion and wonder, as if waking from a nightmare that had lasted forever. "But how?" one of them asked, her voice like wind chimes. "How did you reach us when we were so far gone?" Zephora looked at Kalen, and he saw in her eyes the same revelation that was dawning in his own heart. "Because we found something the darkness can't corrupt or consume," she said. "We found each other. And that love, that connection, reminded us that we were never meant to fight alone." The luminous core around their necks pulsed with gentle warmth, and suddenly Kalen understood its true purpose. It wasn't just a weapon against the darkness. It was a beacon, a way for lost souls to find their way back to the light. Worked best when shared between hearts that truly understood each other. "The plague," Kalen said suddenly. "The crimson breath. If your people were healers originally. ... We can reverse it," Malaker finished, hope creeping into his voice for the first time in millennia. Together, we can undo what our despair has wrought, but we'll need guidance. We'll need someone to show us how to heal without losing ourselves.
Avars.
Extended her hand to the ancient being who had been her enemy for so long. Then let us start again. All of us. Let us remember what it means to be guardians of life instead of harbingers of death. As Malachar took her hand, his transformation completed, revealing a being of crystalline light whose beauty was matched only by the profound sadness in his ancient eyes. I don't know if I can forgive myself for what I've done, he said. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Kalen said, thinking of all the patience he had lost over the years, all the times he had failed despite his best efforts. It's about choosing to do better next time, and next time you won't be alone. The hospital around them began to change. The corruption and decay healing as the former members of the Umbral Collective used their restored power to undo the damage they had caused. Outside, Kalen could sense the city itself responding, the plague beginning to recede as it was overwhelmed by waves of healing energy. This is only the beginning, Zephyra said, her voice full of quiet joy. There are other worlds, other dimensions where the darkness has taken hold. But now we have something we never had before, a way to reach those who have lost their way. A way to remind them that love is stronger than despair, Kalen added, pulling her close. That connection is more powerful than isolation. First rays of dawn broke through the hospital windows, painting the world in shades of gold and rose. Kalen realized that their love story was just beginning. They had found each other in the shadow of death, but they would spend eternity proving that light could shine in even the darkest places. 6 months later, Kalen stood in the same hospital where he had first met Zephyra, but the building had been transformed. What had once been a sterile, clinical environment now hummed with life and light. The walls themselves seemed to glow with a gentle radiance, and patients who came seeking healing found not just physical restoration, but a renewal of hope they had never expected. Dr. Thorne called Dr. Miranda Voss, who had remained as administrator. Despite the dramatic changes, the delegation from the Berlin facility is here for their training. Kayla nodded, watching through the window as a group of former Umbral Collective members worked alongside human doctors in the garden that had sprouted spontaneously in the hospital's courtyard. The integration hadn't been without challenges. How do you explain to the world that the creatures that had once terrorized them were now their greatest allies in fighting disease and despair? They're ready, Zephora said, appearing beside him with that same grace that had captivated him on their first meeting. But now her violet eyes held a peace that hadn't been there before, a contentment that came from no longer carrying her burden. Alone, Malachar has been working with the trauma victims in the Eastern Ward. His ability to absorb pain without being corrupted by it is remarkable now that he has an anchor. An anchor. It's what they had all needed. Not just the power to heal, but someone to share the weight of healing with. The luminous core had always been meant to be divided, to create networks of light that could support each other through the darkest times. The pregnancy is showing, Kalen said softly, his hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly. Had discovered weeks ago that their bond had created something unprecedented. A child who would be born carrying light in her very DNA, a new generation of guardians who would never have to face the darkness alone. Alicia Sephora whispered, using the name they had chosen. She's already responding to the core's energy. I can feel her awareness growing stronger each day. They walked together through the hospital corridors, past rooms where impossible recoveries were becoming routine. The staff had learned to accept that medicine could be both science and miracle, that healing could come from technology and touch, from knowledge and love working in harmony. In the children's ward, they found a scene that never failed to move them. A young girl named Aria, who had been born with a genetic condition that should have been fatal, was now teaching other sick children how to sense the light within themselves. Her laughter echoed through the halls, a sound that had once been rare in pediatric hospitals. She's one of the new ones, Zephyr explained to the visiting delegation. Children born after the integration. They seem to have an innate connection to the healing energy that we adults had to learn to access. Will they need guardians like us? Asked Lysander, one of the former shadow beings who had become Kellen's closest friend. His crystalline form had adapted to appear more human, but his eyes still held the depth of someone who had seen the universe's darkest corners. "They'll need teachers," Kalen replied. "Guides who can show them how to use their gifts without being overwhelmed by them. But they'll never be alone the way we were." As the day wore on, they received reports from healing centers around the world. The network of light that had begun with their love was spreading, connecting souls across continents and cultures. Former battlefields were becoming gardens. War-torn cities were experiencing unprecedented peace, and diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries were beginning to disappear. "It's not just the physical healing," Zephyra mused as they stood together on the hospital's roof, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "It's the reminder that we're all connected, that suffering shared is suffering halved, and joy shared is joy doubled." "The old stories had it wrong," Kalen said, his arms wrapped around her from behind. "Love isn't about finding your other half. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be whole, someone who helps you become the best version of yourself. And then using that wholeness to heal the world," Zephyra added, leaning back against his chest. Together. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, each one seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the luminous core around their necks. Across the cosmos, other worlds were beginning to wake up. Other civilizations were discovering that love could indeed conquer darkness. That connection was stronger than isolation. "Ready for tomorrow?" Kalen asked, knowing that the next day would bring new challenges, new souls to heal, new darkness to transform into light. "Ready for forever," Zephyra replied, turning in his arms to face him. "As long as we face it together." Kissed as the stars wheeled overhead, their love a beacon that would guide lost souls home for generations to come. In the distance, they could hear the sound of children laughing, of adults finding hope they had thought lost forever, of a world learning to heal itself through the simple recognition that no one had to suffer alone. They had met in the shadow of death, but they had discovered something far more powerful. That love, when shared completely and without reservation, could transform not just our hearts, but the entire universe. And in that transformation, they had found not just their happily ever after, but the beginning of a new age for all of creation. The dawn was eternal, and they would spend forever ensuring that its light reached every corner of existence, one healed heart at a time.